Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Marcus, and we are now gathering once again as we work into Portals of the Soul and looking at a very interesting area, the ghost, a compensatory. Yes, I had to actually look it up.
Compensatory.
Okay, great. So I actually have had to look this up, what the word meant, and it's yeah, quite interesting. So just to say a couple of things before we get started, welcome Aviv, and I'm part of the host team, and you'll meet the rest of us in a few minutes. We just ask that you please keep your camera on as much as you like to see us. We like to see you. We might use this recording, but we will not use anybody's images if you do not want to be shown. So if you have any issue, please just send us a quick note and we'll be sure to be mindful of that fact. So we have a very full packed 3 hours ahead. We're going to do breakout rooms. We're going to hear from people along the way. We're going to have a little break. I will remind you of Eve because I know you you get going. So welcome to the day. So happy to see so many different faces. And over to you, Aviv.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And my audio is still coming through clear?
Yes, very good.
Let's actually, for the beginning of the day, have Lisa, you come back here with us, and Peter and Patrick and Kyriaki as the Portals team, as I walk us through the way of today. I will begin by describing where the project is, the Portals into the Soul, give us a bit of an orientation about where we are and also what's ahead of us. And then we will lead into the main body of work of today, which centers on chapter 2. And as we do so, because the nature of chapter 2 is so compound in content, the approach today is very slow. We will make a step forward and engage in a specific practice to help us not just hear the words, but feel our way into the nature of what we are about to embark on. And I remember that I was about to turn this camera on as well.
And may I just say, Aviv, because I am sorry, I didn't say so. I wanted to thank Paul for that lovely music as we entered into this process. And when you say this soft feeling of what we'll be with today, thank you, Paul, for bringing that to us because it really set the stage as we begin.
Indeed. Thank you, Lisa. So we are focusing today on chapter 2 in Portals into the Soul, a ghost, a compensatory act, which we will get into a little bit today. Where the project is, we published earlier in the year the preamble. The preamble described how this work started to appear, why it is appearing now, and also offered assistance as to how to approach the work. Chapter 1 focused on the 3 lives, the 3 impulses, the 3 natures of the soul, specifically the first life of the soul, which is its desire to keep us alive and protect us and get us out of danger. The life 2 that forever is encouraging and nudging us to learn, to improve, to get better in just about anything we do. And chapter 2 went into the insight of separation events and the ghost, which we will get into today. I want to alert you that there are 5 different ways to process and get acquainted in and metabolize this content. Okay, so when you come to the homepage, that's the homepage, and you scroll halfway through the homepage, you will get to core inquiries, which are the series we are generating. And when you explore and click into portals into the soul, it brings you to this page, which is the landing page where you'll find access to all the chapters and more. And if, for example, you went to chapter 2, it will bring up the video. So here are the 5 ways to process this content. You can turn the video and watch the beautiful images that accompany the narration, or you can choose to do what my 92-year-old mother, she's very still sharp mentally, and because she was a musician in her professional life, she tells me that she listens, closes her eyes, and that's how she is able to internalize the content in the best way. So some people prefer to listen without actually the distraction or the beauty of the images. So that's a second way. A third way, you can listen to the narration and read through the copy that's being narrated, and then you'll discover that here and there, when I narrated, I perhaps changed a word or two, so it's not word for word exactly, but it's 99.9 exact. And some people prefer to turn the recording off and simply read, because when you read, you can stay with a paragraph longer. So these are 3 ways you can process directly the content. The 4th way is that the team we have on screen have been generating over the last couple of months. This is our YouTube channel, so here you see the videos, but when you go on live, you'll actually get the recordings of the live conversations. And the reason Peter and Kyriaki and Lisa and Patrick decided to generate these conversations, and they are live, so they will you'll often see a few days in advance, and you can join them live and make comments and ask questions, or you can catch those recordings later. And the idea behind this was the sense that this content is quite condensed, quite compound, and that some people will find it easier to actually metabolize and process it in a conversational way. So that's what the team is creating in these live conversations. So that's the 4th way we are processing through this content. And the 5th way is what we're doing here today, which is the idea of actually creating an experiential, interactive process where the focus is on moving from ideas and concepts to more of a sensing, feeling, experiencing all that the content is inviting us to begin to sense into. So for example, in the course of today, we will probably seed at least 6, maybe more practices, each one of which we could stay with for half an hour or an hour or more. And the idea is to simply offer you practices that you can choose to take on and build as we proceed. So that's by way of orientation. Before I bring some slides and begin to lead us through the content of today, any build comment from any one of you Portals team, please?
Just to welcome everyone into this journey. It's already been a magical journey into the mysteries of the soul, and really discovering more how we can come into contact with our soul, how it works, the different layers of it. And it's really an exploration. It's really a dive into a territory that is often considered as an exclusive job of the mystics and the priests and the psychologists, but which have a soul, and everyone around us as well. So it's really something that I believe that we should explore together. And looking forward to today, and welcome to everyone.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as Aviv said, we've had several conversations that you can see on YouTube, but we find like the more we talk about this, the more it comes alive in us. And these are such great understandings and practical ways of how to think about one's life. So I hope today will take us down the road. I'm sure today will take us down the road in that way so that we can really apply this and make it part of our life.
Yeah, I would add to that, we've been working on portals into the soul really since the year began. And through all the conversations and the events, something really has become clear to me recently is that you've got to slow down. It's not, the world we live in is not a soul speed. So for us to listen and connect and kind of feel the nudgings and the voice of our soul inside us is very much this need to slow down a bit, to listen a little deeper, to sense and have a presence in ourselves, in our inner lives. And so I'm looking forward to today's work because it's very much about that. And the iHow team brings that aspect in, is to slow down and to get more in touch with how this feels. And so I think that's just such an important aspect of this project.
Thank you, Peter. And I would just add that I've been looking forward to today because I found that when we can come together, even in a group like this, it's a bigger group, but it's not too big. Things happen that don't happen when I'm on my own and trying to work into the content. And it always brings out very special dimensions to be able to do the practices and hear other people and get together in groups. So these events are always very special. So I've been looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, Kyriaki, Lisa, and Peter. So let me please release you to enjoy the rest of the experience with us and come forward when there are opportunities to contribute. And let's have Beth and Eleni join us here in the spotlighted area. Beth and Eleni and Rita are generating what we call the iHow practices. iHow stands for Internal Human Orchestra Work. And I asked that they will help accompany me as I walk through the content here. And so here we go. I am going to bring this slide. Indeed, Portals into the Soul, Chapter 2, The Ghost, a Compensatory Act. Now, what we already just seeded now is this idea that we are working to shift from words and concepts to living connections and to give you an immediate access to it. If you want to have with you pen and paper, which you will need to use again later, if you were to write the word home on that paper in front of you, and the word home is just a 4-letter word, and it's a concept. But when you let yourself consider what the word will bring up in you, you may begin to get specific feelings and specific tastes and sensations and memories and experiences, all those. So I'm going to go quiet for a minute and I'm going to ask you to just write in front of the word home the first 7 dimensions that for you come up when you think of home. Okay, very good. You may even have the experience of having traveled later in life to the place where you experienced your childhood, and you looked at the street and the houses you used to look at when you were very young, and all of a sudden these big houses, they look a lot smaller because you're now bigger. And so there is this experience that you reassess and readjust how you have experienced your home in later stages of life. And with each one of us, the experience of home will bring up a whole set of memories and dimensions. And some will even say, well, I no longer associate the word home with any house, with any physical location. Home is something I feel inside. Home is something I create inside. So each and every one of us, we've made the word home the 3 or 4 or 5 dimensional experience that we associate with home. Let me try this with another word. So if you write just below on the page, write the word hope. And I'm going to go quiet for 10 seconds and let you write down whatever the word hope brings up in you. So some of us may write specifically ideas or experiences we associate with hope. Some will describe the feeling, the sensation, the energetic quality of hope. In my case, I may recount in my own trace that I have in my adult life walked 5 times through a desert. I don't mean physically through a desert. I walked a lot more than 5 times in a physical desert, but experientially, in terms of a period where I experienced a sense of despair for months or for sometime for years, and I needed to always find the sense of hope through these times when I walked in the desert. So I encourage us to, as we move into today, feel in a deeper way what's beyond the words, such that indeed as we go deeper into this material, into this content, we truly are shifting from head knowledge to embodied experience. Head knowledge is indeed very important. In a bit we will get even deeper into the differentiating nature of 3 kinds of knowledge. Head knowledge is important when we are in the exploration into the journey of the soul, the portals into the soul. We're truly seeking to access a throughout embodied experience, full, whole person knowledge, not just head knowledge, which truly brings us now to this interesting question. what is the language of the soul? What is the language of the soul? And when we think and feel our way into this, I'm actually going to go quiet for 10 seconds. Let you feel the question, not just hear the words in the head, but turn inside and ask yourself, what is the language of the soul? Indeed. So as you turn inside, you may discover that you have immediate access to it, or you may discover that you have other sounds or other voices coming up in you. And all that is fine. What it reveals is that when we ask what is the language of the soul, there is an immediate accompanying question that will show up, which is, how do we make space to discover? How do we make space to discover what is the language of the soul? And the reason we need to ask how do we make space to discover is because we go through life, as Peter said a few minutes ago, with such a speed that we get frazzled and we get disjointed. It's one of the reasons why with Beth and Eleni and Rita, we are generating the internal human orchestra work, the I-how practices, to help us get centered, to help us get more integrated. And what we're discovering is that the nervous system is all spread out on all the many signals that draw our attention. And the nervous system often is in partly a defense mode. What do I need to protect from? So when we say, how do we create a space? How do we make a space to discover? We first of all mean in the somatic sense and in the energetic space. So here is a very simple practice to help us get a little grounded and more centered. I am going to use these fingers to create a very slow movement. You may choose to do the same with me, or you may choose to move one finger or one toe. What I'm demonstrating is I invite you to each choose what you do. Somebody may choose to do a very slow movement with the head. Well, we're bringing our total focus to one very simple movement, which when we do so will actually free up the attentional dispersed to the attentional dispersion to bring the focus to one spot. So try to concentrate on how it feels in this one or two finger or one or toe, or the movement like Beth is making with the hand, just very gently. I'm going to stay with this movement. So I first feel those two fingers, the thumb and that first finger moving, and then try to feel how the small movement, in my case, how the movement that I'm making with these two fingers, how I can feel the signal of it in the entire palm, because the system is connected. And I can actually feel the signal of the movement through up my arm and up my shoulder. See if you can begin to feel the small movement and how it extends to the rest of your hand and arm and to the upper back. And when you train yourself, you can actually feel a very small movement all the way throughout your body. Like I'm asking myself to pay attention now, how do I feel this movement in the middle of my back and in the lower back? Can actually feel it down to my toes. And in my head. Okay, very good. Let's relax this. Thank you. So one way we make somatic and energetic space is we bring the attention to one spot and to the smallest movement. And we stay with it. And that smallest movement for you may be listening and paying attention to your breath. This is why many meditational practices begin by paying attention to your breath. And then how do we make mental space and space in the inner lives? Well, again, to see the simplest starter practice that we will come back to in the future again. You may feel that you still have another voice playing in the background from what you were doing a couple of hours ago, or a conversation you've had, or some argument you've had with somebody, or a movie you watched, or so whatever you hear in your interior, in the background, ask it, tell it, turn to it and say, okay, everything is all right. Could you please relax and take a step back to give me more space? I want to be more available and create even larger space to be with this experience as we inquire into the soul. Just turn inside, and whatever voice is rising up, acknowledge it and ask it to take a step back or sit down somewhere else in your room, or even ask it to go out and sit in another room so you have a larger space. And see that your mental and inner space expands at least to the size of the room you're in now, maybe to the size of your house, maybe to a much larger space. Okay, very well. So thank you. So with that, we can now explore the next step in terms of what is the language of the soul. Let me actually, before I move to the next part, Beth or Eleni, anything from you about how you're experiencing that sense of making space, just before I transition to the next part?
It creates space and in the way of expansion, in the way of flow, and with an ease.
Eleni, anything from you at this point?
Yes, it expands you, it creates space, and it also tune you in with yourself, with your better self.
Thank you. And you may describe the experience, each one of us in a different way. What we are inviting is that as we make the journey into the soul, as Peter said, slow down, and as we're now adding, make space. With that, I am going to now lead us into the three portals of knowing, the three portals of communication. And I'm going to walk us through these three steps, three portals, and I'm going to give us a living, embodied experience with each of those. And the key idea here is that the soul mediates all three. Soul facilitates and mediates all three. And at the same time, they have a distinct nature. And when we complete the walk through these three portals, we'll bring some of your voices to get the sense of how you are experiencing these. Okay, so we begin with what we call the sensory portal. The sensory portal and the somatic portal is the one where first we activate the 5 senses. We see, we touch, we hear, we smell, we taste, we can sense and feel warmth, and we can have the somatic registration. So let's do this simple exercise. We're all muted, so please look around you and say out loud 5 things that you see. In my case, I'm seeing the screen in front of me. I see the microphone I'm using. I see the glass of water. And I see the glass door window in front of me. And I see the 5, as the 5th thing, I see the beautiful trees outside the glass door window. So 5 things you can see. And now, please, let's experience 4 things we can touch. So I touch the desk in front of me and I feel the texture of it. And then I touch the microphone. It has a very different texture and feel. And again, the glass of water has again a different texture. And if I turn to touch the leaf behind me, it has again a very different feel of touch. Okay, let's see if I can, each one of us, notice 3 things we can hear. So we're all hearing my voice now, hopefully. I hear the hum of the furnace, and I hear my granddaughter jumping upstairs, playing. And let's see if we can detect 2 things we smell. Well, it's very easy. In my case, I smell the breakfast Sarah, my wife, and Talia, my granddaughter, prepared earlier. And that smell has both the omelette and the fresh salad that they've generated. So 2 things I smell. And I taste the water, the warm water. So 1 taste. So 5 things you see, 4 things you touch, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. And you may get the sense of the warmth, the temperature in where you are. Is it very warm? Is it a little chilly? Finally, a somatic sense just of how you are sitting. So I'm sitting back, relaxed. I feel myself resting on the chair, and I get the sense of my physical and body location in the larger space of the room. All that registration is part of the sensory experience. I'm going to go quiet for a moment, just to let you feel how we are alerting and activating the sensory somatic portal of impression and knowing. And hopefully it brings up a sense of alertness with that part of the language of the soul. The soul facilitates and mediates that dimension of experience. So let's now bring into it the second portal of knowing, the second language we use a lot of in this modern world, the mental portal. Mental portal allows us to search for information, to identify things by name, by shape, by what they represent, to inquire how things are related to each other, to inquire the meaning of something, to inquire how the world around us works, and to connect the dots that we are discovering, and then to map those connections and build deeper reasons, and to calculate and conceptualize and evaluate. Very important to appreciate, as the word appreciate has these two meanings. We can appreciate another person or can appreciate an experience, and there is the meaning of appreciation as something that augments and grows. Like you want the portfolio you have in the bank to appreciate, that means it builds value. So the mental portal can do all these things and can bring us to focus on any particular object or idea we choose to focus on. So I'm going to go quiet for a moment, and perhaps you want to focus on one aspect of the mental portal, perhaps connecting the dots. We started by describing here the mental and the sensory portals, and you may begin to connect how it relates to describing that we intend to slow down and make space and discover the language of the soul. So I'm going to go quiet for a moment and let you discover which of the dots we are painting on the map you are beginning to connect, and what is the map of meaning you're beginning to create through the mental portal. So we can sense how different in nature the mental portal is to the sensory portal. The sensory portal is very much wired to the physical reality around us in the first place. The mental portal is wired to a conceptual mental realm, although because we are products of 4 centuries of largely a materialistic, physicalist orientation in the science, the way science has been applied, so the mental faculty too, the mental portal too, is largely oriented in the world today to physical things, but with the capacity to build concepts, to build a map of meaning. And now I can bring the third portal, which is the spiritual portal. So whereas in the case of the sensory portal, it is quite easy to detect the senses and the registration of the sensory and somatic portal, and it's quite easily available to also identify the nature of how we process information and language, the language I use through the mental portal. The spiritual portal is a little more subtle, partly by design, so we can't mess around with it, because it is there to offer us even a more direct access to the soul and the spirit, and therefore it is protected, so it cannot be corrupted. A lot easier to impact the sensory and the mental portals, not so easy to confuse or corrupt a spiritual portal. We can shut it down, not listen to it, not be in touch with it. But we can't really distort or corrupt it very much. It has its own built-in wiring that either we attune to it on its terms or it backs off. It's not very active, it's more latent. When it is active by resonance, by clairvoyance, by sense of communion. When I mean communion here, I don't just mean the religious sense, but the sense of being connected and tethered to something that delivers a registration and a sense of being connected to something bigger than ourselves. Some aspects of the spiritual portal will come alive through interior sense organs that are largely dormant. But when we engage in an inquiry like we're engaged in here, we may begin to discover that literally every part of us can begin to be infused with spiritual dimension. Even the internal organs will offer us more than the biological function. They will begin to offer us some hints and nudges as to where we should go and where we should not go. And there is also in the spiritual portal this nudge. For some of you, it may be the nudge that brought you here today. It's the nudge that sometime will guide you to a place where you may find the spiritual food you need, spiritual nourishment you need. So it also has a natural attunement to its sense of value and values. We live in a world where there is generally the idea that values is something we acquire by education, by experience, by upbringing. It is true that we get very much influenced largely in our values by our experiences and upbringing. What I'm suggesting here is that there are spiritual values that are not based in education and the way we are socially shaped and constructed, but are built in. As for example, it's natural for a human being to support life and to be defiant against what will take life away, what will bring death and destruction. We know that children, before it is trained out of them, are naturally wired to caring and to sharing and to even playing with a sense of fairness, which means those are properties that are wired in the soul-spirit compound, and we only think later we need to educate ourselves and each other about it. No, those values are actually, and that sense of conscience is there in the first place. So I'm going to go quiet for a moment and let you just sense how all three dimensions, they are facilitated and mediated by the soul. And I'll begin with Beth and Eleni, if you want to offer any sense of how you are experiencing these three portals, and then we'll bring a few additional voices on this. We are still making our way into the discovery of chapter 2, but took a longer space and time here to sense into the language of the soul. So please, any sense from you, Beth or Eleni?
So in the sensory, it picks up what's going on in the nearby and begins to create like a collage to get a picture. In the mental, it's a fullness of a different nature that has not only questions, but like multiple pieces that want to be filled in. In the spiritual, it almost feels like it's the flow that causes everything not only to come together, but to expand in an integrated form between us, our ecology, and perhaps why we're here.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, Eleni.
Thank you. In the sensory, I actually I registered it. I sensed it. I felt it. It's like a knowing. In the mentals, it's like you start to see different details, and an appreciation of being alive, of being in this moment, and in the spiritual, it costs something to connect you inside, to search more, and motivate you to a different ecology that is with values, it is with qualities, and it gives you a different consciousness and an access. It creates you an access to something else.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eleni. So let's get a couple, three more voices here. A brief registration about what does it feel like when you get attuned to the sensory, the mental, and the spiritual portals.
It's like being at home. You know, I'm bigger and taller and more connected. And it's personal and impersonal, with a really huge appreciation in all senses of the word of what the human constitutes.
Thank you. Please, Margarita.
What I felt is the response that happens, that there is always a response from the experience. So when the experience is sensory, I felt it was an immediate, let's say, response, quick, and more, let's say, it felt more automatic.
Mm-hmm.
But with the mental, there is that I felt a solo response depending on what exactly is what I'm doing. So if I identify something that brings light, joy, something beautiful, something that helps life, helps me, then the response is one of joy. And of course, you know, all this variety that never ends. And with, well, with the spiritual, I think there are special moments, you know, they are not, I don't think there are so many moments of this experience as they are of the other two every day. You know, I feel it is less habitual, automatic, you know, this kind of thing. It is less. Thankfully, they do happen. And the response is one of gratitude, of of happiness, because it's very, as my friend said, very expansive, and it feels like a blessing if there is a spiritual registering, we are a blessing.
Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Janice, you'll be the last on this one, please. Janice?
Yes. Hi, Aviv. Yeah, one of the things that I would say today is that it really had a sense with it of beginning to bring together lives that have their own life, but also at the same time, they're not separate. They function together. And going through that process of giving each of those lives their due in terms of the overall picture of where they sit in us as humans really carries with it a sense of greater integration and less fragmentation. So that's what I would say for now.
Thank you very much. So indeed, that's very well said. This sense of integration is one of the key natures. Once we invite the whole person awareness of these three dimensions. Now, just to build a little more into it, let's recognize that the sensory portal, as we said, mostly orients with a physical landscape and with physical forms. It sees, it can touch physical forms. The mental portal monitors and evaluates the mental landscape and has the capacity to see and shape mental forms. And indeed, the spiritual portal gets attuned to the spiritual landscape and the forms and dimensions and shapes of the spirit and the soul realms. So we are describing here three spheres, three portals, with each of which there is a sense of vitality. There is a physical vitality we can get to feel in the physical body. There is a mental acuity and vitality that we get to switch on with particular kind of knowledge that we are acquiring. And there is the well-being that we can feel in the physical body, in the mental process, and spiritually. So we are seeing here really three dimensions of vitality, of well-being, and of connection. And if you wanted to build on it just one more layer of awareness, you could say that the sensory portal is primarily wired to the earthly, the planetary soil. The spiritual portal is wired to what I'm going to be describing here as the universal plasma soil, by which I mean sometime you'd hear this described as the place where the creative source of all life. In the East, they will sometimes talk about it as the ground of all being. What is important to take notice is we're coming out of a couple of centuries of materialistic scientific orientation, where the thought is that consciousness and the soul is something that arises from the bottom up, from the physical world. I deeply believe humanity is in a process of shape-shifting, and the coming 2 to 4 decades will bring a much larger part of humanity to the realization that that is a false premise, that in actuality, the universal plasma soil is the place where all is arising, and that the material universe and the spiritual universe, if you like, are co-arising, co-emerging at the same time, and that what we are experiencing in the planetary realm in the material sense was actually also an energy that condensed in the first place. So that's very crudely described and needs a lot more time, which we will get to in the future. What's important is, in the context of today, the primary faculty we have learned to use over the last several centuries is the mental faculty. The mental faculty is the faculty that enables us to both shape the material world and connect and create in the spiritual world. So the insight and the awareness about the mental portal and the mental faculty is that they have a unique creative and evolutionary function. We shape the physical environment around us through our intentions and what we want to create. And we have the capacity to use the mental faculty to connect and commune with, find communion with the spiritual realm. When we do so, we may discover that the spiritual portal can actually infuse the mental portal and the sensory portal. So we are describing truly not three separate spheres, but rather interpenetrating spheres that get to co-arise. That's all I'll say about that. I went a little off script beyond what's covered in chapter 2, but it was just too attractive for me to not pick up the opportunity to integrate this awareness. It is all that we just covered here that brings us back to chapter 2. And chapter 2 offers in the beginning a very important premise, which is that it says and invites us into a universal view. We each, through our life, feel that I got to find who I am and what I'm about and why I'm so special. And chapter 2 guides us to realize that the universal view, the universe's view, is you matter not because your personality is so special, but because the unique qualities and the essence configuration of those qualities that you represent is a totally unique, once in the history of the universe, algorithmic composition that you represent, which is why we are about to, in a minute, lead to a practice of discovering and getting in touch with your unique qualities. And so it offers that with this awareness, we ought to ask ourselves, how many people truly get to express more than the 5% of their unique configuration and potential? I propose that the percentage is very, very small. And later today, after we go through the next practice and we step into a room, when we come back from rooms, we will engage with a segment that will describe the concerns of the soul, and some of the concerns of the soul relate to the meta-crises that the world is facing now. And when we get to that part, I will invite that we each engage in it through the lens of the resilience of the soul. So we don't contract, but through the resilience of the soul. And the invitation will be that, could it be that as we begin to express and experience and unlock the 6 and the 7 and the 8 and the 9% of our potential, the universe itself may begin to more fully reveal itself. The 3 teams that unlocked in 1998 the discovery that the universe is not only expanding but accelerating, which was counter to what the conventional belief in astrophysics was at the time. Adam Rees and Saul Perlmutter, and I forget the third name of the person that led the third team. They won the Nobel Prize in 2011 for the discovery that changed our paradigm, because we discovered that there was more energy in the universe, which they decided at the time to call dark energy and dark matter. But what they established is that we only know 5% of the universe. Truly. Oh, I have had for the last 20 years a living contemplation. What about the 6th and the 7th and the 8%? And it led me to begin to realize that if we want to unlock the 6 and the 7 and the 8% in the universe, we begin in ourselves, because we are part of the universe. And this is part of the contemplation. And it is this, friends, that I now bring us to the soul, to the ghost, rather. And I will do here the last part with Beth and Eleni and then release you. So what is the ghost? We are describing the ghost. So chapter 1 described how the soul has the capacity to expand and move through the first impulse to keep us alive, the second impulse to nudge us to learning, the third impulse to get attuned to our purpose. What chapter 2 describes is a sense that when, for one reason or another, the soul gets distanced from its natural capacity, natural enactment, it naturally seeks to re-engage, reconnect to its connective flow. But if it can't do so, it gets fixated on this state that it experienced, the fully expanded state, and it tries to reproduce it. Instead of the presence field embodied master that it used to experience, the flow or the joy or the vitality, whatever the quality was. And in a minute we are going into an experience that will help each one of us unlock the unique qualities. When it fails to re-expand, it gets fixated, and it's a bit like this. I'm going to demonstrate it physically. So, and some of you may wish to actually stand to do this with me. Beth and Eleni will. So when the soul is in its fuller range, it can contract and expand. Contract and expand. I am under pressure, under stress, so I can be focused on one thing and deal with it, and then I can relax and expand to the full playful range of the soul. I can contract and expand. There is natural reversibility. But what happens when there is trauma, when there is a true separation event, a whole range of reasons that will cause trauma, and I get contracted to a place that is frozen. I cannot expand fully up here. So in this contracted posture, the soul still remembers what it was like up here, but it can't get there for one reason or another, because the experience has been so traumatic or so freezing in its nature. So what it now does, it no longer has access to the natural qualities it had in the fully expanded state. It reproduces an act, a performative act that resembles it, but is no longer in its full embodied sense. So what we're trying to do now, what we're about to try to do is go through an experience of sensing to the fuller range of qualities that are naturally available for the soul. But just before we do, I would like to make a space here for a couple, three voices. How are you experiencing so far this sense of the journey to settle into the fact that we've each had experiences that left us somewhat contracted, and we are about to reach for the qualities that are naturally part of our soul configuration. I'd invite one or two voices to speak to how what is it you're sensing when we describe that sense of the ghost, contraction, and expansion.
I got you.
Yep.
Okay. So clearly the first thing is that in the contracted state of trauma, I feel imprisoned, I feel afraid, I feel shunned. And out here I feel liberated, free in myself, but also able to see everyone else. And with it comes a joy, a love, a generosity, so many good things that I wish, that I feel for me and I wish for them. It's an amazing difference.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Please, Enrique. We can hear you, please.
A realization came about these two movements of the soul, contraction, expansion, and it feels like, in a way, they're both natural movements. And if they are so, what is their function, and how can we learn from it instead of being victim of it? Or so that was a sense that I had while doing these gestures that you suggested. So yes, I wanted to offer that.
Thank you, Enrique. Please, Rivka.
Yeah, the sense that came in is like in the contraction, it's like you feel you kind of being crippled, and that you learn, like maybe in the leg or something, that it was so natural for you to walk. And you learn to live with this crippleness and find ways to bypass them. And when in the expansion, it felt that you can breathe, that you can revive that leg or hand that has been crippled. So this is how it started to feel.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Eleni and Beth, for accompanying us through this. Let me do a quick reality check, and I go to gallery. Do we need to do a bio break here, or are we ready to proceed? Yes, let's do a quick bio break. When we come back, I'm going to lead us through a whole other discovery of getting attuned to your natural qualities,
We'll see you back at 7 in 7 minutes, if possible. Thank you.